Oh, buddy. The genetics agree with me.
Hey guys. Hey Donna, sorry, it's been a while. What are we talking about again?
Ancient Rome as a unifying, simple narrative is a complete false construction of European history by the church.
Oh, right, of course, carry on.
The modern genetic makeup of Italians doesn't arrive until around 1000 AD or CE.
So the point here is to disprove the existence of the Roman Empire by saying that the modern genetic makeup of Italians does not appear until several hundred years after the fall of Rome. Essentially, Rome was not real because modern Italians are not Etruscan. But according to the very history of the Romans, the Italians shouldn't be Etruscan. Now, by the time the Western Roman Empire finally did fall, it was already very diverse and very multicultural. But between the fall and 1000 AD, it was resettled at least 4 times by other peoples.
Shalom, and welcome to another edition here at the Genesis 49ers page, where we say no to vague descriptions, and we give you thorough breakdowns. Today's topic is Edom, a red people of antiquity. First slide, Latin. Therefore Don Isaac Arben properly argued on the verse, her nobles and no kingdoms are there, because the head of Rome has not the title of king, in that court are many nobles, the cardinals. Josephus in his Antiquities relates that when Joseph and his brethren, accompanied by a numerous Egyptian army, carried his father for interment, the dukes of Esau came out to attack them. They fought them and conquered and took Sepho, the son of Eliphaz, the grandson of Esau, prisoner, who after being sometime kept in Egypt fled with his people to Africa, where the king of Carthage honorably received him, and made him general of his army against the Chittim, which is Italy, over whom he attained some signal victories, but subsequently passing over the Italians, he turned his arms against the Carthaginians and conquered the children of Jubal, who resided in Pisa. Seeing his prosperous success and the valor of his arms, they raised him to be king and called him Zepho Janus, which is the same as Saturn, the planet that they then worshiped, so that he became the first king of Italy. His descendants subsequently built cities until the empire devolved on Duke Madel, mentioned in Genesis. It was who built Rome. Previous to Romulus, surrounded it with walls. These are the words of the prince of historians, Josephus, from which it is seen the descendants of Esau, who is Edom, reigned in Chittim, which is in Italy. And this Josephus is the Yasipon, okay, not the Flavius Josephus, but the Yasipon. From the fame of this king, many Edomites subsequently came to people Italy. By then was Rome founded, not as Sallust says by the Trojans nor the people of Evander and Virgil, as Virgil asserts, and it's sufficient that Isidore and his etymologies could not resolve the point to give credit to such an ancient authors as have been mentioned. This is further confirmed, for according to the account of some historians, Janus came from the east to Italy about 1500 years before the Christian era, which comes exactly to the 6th year after the burial of Joseph and the engagement with Joseph. And as Don Isaac Arben observes, Latinus, with whom they say the Latin language originated, was one of the dukes of Esau, called in Genesis Duke Lotan, which makes sense because back then you didn't have the Hebrew language didn't have O's in it, you know what I'm saying? So it would be Latan. So this is what we get from the historical data, and the source is the prophets and hagiography by Manasseh ben Israel, page 218. To the right, we have notes. Zepho and Lotan, or Latinus, are both descendants of Esau. Now, remember, Janus is said to come from a country in the east. Zepho, according to the record of the Yasipon, which the book of Jasher took this information from an already recorded document that predated that, which is called the Yasipon. They're both both historical statements claim that these Edomites left and came into this land and conquered and began to rule. That's how Esau came into Europe, and I covered this in my other video, Who was Esau, on my page. Go check it out. Next Remember that as we go to the next slide. Next slide. From the first book of Dionysius of Halicarnassus about the history of the Romans. Chapter 28. Let's start at verse 1. This city, mistress of the whole earth and sea, which the Romans now inhabit, is said to have had its earliest occupants, the barbarian Sicels, where you get Sicilian from, a native race. As to the condition of the place before their time, whether it was occupied by others or inhabited, none can certainly say. Now, the Sicels, according to the secular history, it was already inhabited before anybody known as Romans had came to this land. And that's what we tell you, that Japheth's seed ruled Italy before Esau came and interfered. It's even in their history that the people that are called Romans don't belong to the European plateaus, the European lands. Okay? But sometime later, the Aborigines gained possession of it, having taken it from the occupants after a long war. And that's what we read about Zepho warring with Kittim, giving some validity to that story. But watch this. These people had previously lived on the mountains in unwalled villages and scattered groups. They say that after them, the Pelagians and some of the Greeks conquered that region. At first, they were called Aborigines, but under Latinus, their king, who reigned at the time of the Trojan War, they began to be called Latins. And it's safe to assert that Latan, the Duke of Edom, or the Duke of Hor, depending on how you read the scripture, in Genesis 36, is that Latinus, or Latinus is of that line. You get the word Latin from Esau, Esau's line, his pedigree. 16 generations later, Romulus founded the city and expanded and raised its affairs to the greatest prosperity. See, Romulus, he expanded the city, but it was already found by Latinus, okay, according to the history. And then Dionysius continues in his narrative in these very words, Dionysius and Halicarnassus. There are some who affirm that the Aborigines from whom the Romans are originally descended were natives of Italy, a stock which came into being spontaneously. I call Italy all that the peninsula, which is bounded by the Ionian Gulf, which Ionian means Yuan, and the Tyrrhenian Sea, and thirdly, by the region where the Latins live. The Aborigines were called founders of families or ancestors, but others claim they were called vagabonds, coming together out of many places. Still others have a story of the effect that they were foreigners who came there from Libya. Where did the story Zepho, where did they say Zepho came from according to the Yasopon? He came from Africa. He fled Egypt, and he went from Africa, and then he went up and attacked Chittim, which he went to where Carthage is, which is in North Africa around Libya, Tripoli and all those places. So this is lining up very accurately with the history that the historian Yasopon supplied. But some of the Roman historians say they were Greeks, part of those ones who dwelt in Achaia, and they migrated to there many generations before the Trojan War. So you can see that this history is coinciding and basically collaborating with the history we just read from the Yasopon. All right? Next slide. This is why it's important to go through sources, archaeology, and study this material so we can bring these scriptures to life, so we can bring what's going on in the scriptures to life, instead of just going out there and making statements. Prove it. Next slide. Italy. I presented this in, I think, the Who is Esau video. I'm bringing it here again to just bring the point out even more. So it says, Idomeneus, on finding that his life was in danger, sailed for Italy, where he built soon after his arrival the city of Petelia near Seliantum, or according to some, Seliantum itself. Idomeneus, which is, according to, you can see the name Esau, Edom in there. However, afterwards returned, and as well as Mary, and died in his own country, where a magnificent tomb were erected to them. So you see Esau having relationships with Italy again, just like the Yasopon said. Okay. And King Latinus, which we could easily see a connection linguistically with the Duke Latin or Lotan, right? Which is where the Latin language comes from. It says, where a magnificent tomb was erected to them, at which they received divine honors. The Cretans sacrificed to them as heroes. and then there was invoking them as their protectors. This tomb was still visible at the time of Diodorus at Knossos with the inscription, "Here lies Marion by the side of Edomeneus," which is of Edom. All right. Judaic. It says, "From that day henceforth, Gondalas and his armies of the kings of Africa used to ravage the land of Kittim for spoil and plunder. Sephor always accompanied them. When this Sephor, the son of Eliphaz, traveled to Africa, to Kittim, the inhabitants received him with great honor and presented him with many gifts, that he became very rich, and the troops of Africa spread themselves all over the land of Kittim. And they, having assembled, ascended the mountain of Caporizo. Chronicles Jeremiah. So it's saying the same thing. Another Jewish historian, Chronicles Jeremiah in the Middle Ages, records this. Okay? And we read earlier in the Roman history that foreigners came and took down ancient Italy and became the inhabitants after that. Which you have King Latinus, which that's where the Latin language comes from. Which King Latinus is the Duke Loton. When you read Genesis 36, of the posterity of Esau. You can't make this stuff up. So next slide. Now this is a Arabic source right here, Islamic source. We can go into what they say about it. In contrast to the Persians, the Arabs called themselves black. The Arabs called themselves black, or in general dark color. Because some people say, "Oh, the Arabs are the white man." First of all, Arabs is a mixture of things. Okay, let's put that out there. But the original people in those Arabic lands, like Saudi Arabia, and different areas of the Middle East, were of Ishmael. Okay, they even teach that themselves, but that's for another topic. And they were dark colored. Okay. The Persians are usually described as red, i.e. light skin, because what happened to the Persians? They got conquered by the Greeks, and they mixed with their seed. Ahmar or Hamra, that's what they use for light skin or red, people that look red, like white people, because the blood shows forth to their skin. It says the Banu el-Arar were called in Kufa al-Amira. Consequently, this color designation applies to the Mawali, a man of the term Allah, reddish as if he were Mawala. Red is here used of a lighter color in general. The same color attributes is used on other non-Arab races. In Spain, the Arabs called the indigenous Christians, which I revealed in my video, who was Esau. We called the Christians Edomites, and we called them red. Red and white, their blood showed forth to their skin. This is the same thing the Arabs called them. We called them. It says red here is used lighter color in general. The same color attributes used also other non-Arab races. In Spain, the Arabs called the indigenous Christians Banu el-Hamra or al-Hamra. It need not be specially emphasized that Mudar al-Hamra does not belong here, but is derived from a particular legendary reason. A description of a non-Arab nation as light-skinned is also al-Dama al-Askad. The Franks were also sometimes called Shukar. Okay? It's going to explain why. And this group belongs to the Banu Asfar, a description of the Greeks which is found in a poem ascribed to the pre-Islamic Ad B. Zaid. The literature on this attribute is collected by Steinschneider. One could add the excursus and Ibn Khalikan, number 799. On this name, which is also found in Al-Bukhari, number 7, Asfar, as in fact used in contrast to Aswad. Genealogists who were not satisfied with the correct meaning of the words as the color description saw it as far, the name of the grandchild of Esau, Al-Asfar, father of Rumil, the ancestor of Rum, which is Rome. This is no other than Sephor in Genesis. This is who they tied us with, Sephor, because they believe he is the progenitor of the Edomite Romans. And what do they call him? Red. They call him Asfar, describing the Greeks, describing these Edomites, signifying them as red people. All right, so next slide. Oh, I got Alhamra means red Greeks, Asfar, Romans and Greeks, linking them with Esau. And that's the source is Muslim Studies, page 268 by Goes Higher. I go side here. Next slide. The Romans are descended from Elrum, son of Esau, son of Isaac, son of Ibrahim, the friend of God. And they are named after their ancestors. It is related that Esau had 30 sons, of whom Elrum was one. But these Romans have been joined by the tribes that did not belong to them, namely Tanukh, Nid, and Sulim, and Gosen. These tribes were in Syria, and when the Muslims drove them out, they entered into the land of Romans and mingled and multiplied, and then when they were reckoned as Romans by descent. But they are not Romans, and the Roman genealogists know the fact. A History of Arabs in Sudan by Sir Harold Alfred, page 199. So this is what they teach. They teach the Edomites are the progenitors of Rome within the Arabic literature. Okay? So you trying to say the Arabs of Esau, but they teach who Esau is. They know who Esau is throughout their ancestors knew who Esau was. But you're not going to regard that because you want to go off of your interpretation and your teacher's interpretation, and you want to have an interpretation fight. I'm not about interpretation fighting. I'm about getting down to the bottom of it and learning the truth. Next slide. Again, Roman. The king of Pontus, who has been compared to the Greek Hannibal, had, it is true, the vast projects and ungovernable will of the chief and the mercenaries. But let's get to the point. When he confronts the Roman, it says, the fierce face of the Roman, at the bottom, it says, the fierce face of the Roman, his red hair, his green eyes, and his red complexion spotted with white, particularly amused the besieged. They cried to him. So how does this Roman look? This Roman is described as red complexion with white because he's talking about his skin being pale and he can see the blood coming through his skin, making him look or appear red. So the Romans were identified as red people. Okay, we're going to get into that. And that source is History of the Roman Republic by Jules Michelet, page 294, or Michelet. Next slide. Rufus. Rufus was a common name amongst the Romans. Rufus is Latin for red. For example, Pompeius Rufus, Sulpius Rufus, and Titius Rufus. Okay? Renowned people. And I believe that's Justinian right there. And look at him. He's red. The blood is showing forth through his skin. He's depicted red, how his skin works, how his body works. This is why they are called the nation of Edom. It's not hard. And we know about black people calling other black people red, but they understood that. Like if we go to West Africa, they'll call a black person Coco. But that red they're talking about is not talking about Edomites red. They're not saying they look like Caucasians or look like this. Because if I look that color up, it's gonna be like my skin tone, very, very dark brownish. Anyway, next slide. Okay. Ionian, you won. Keep that in mind. The first source is Erythea means the red or blushing one. I want you to have that definition in your mind. Ethrae, one of the 12 cities of the Ionian League, or the Joan League, or Joanian League, right? Which this is Japheth's children, but one of the 12 cities of his league was Ethrae, called Red. Okay, on the coast opposite the island Chios, allegedly founded by a party from Crete and later by the Ionians under Sinopsis and Codrus, and the city was prosperous from the start, for all in turn which the rest of Ionia under Lydia and then Persia. Ethrae was later a member of the Delian League. An important inscription, probably late 450 BC, shows Athens brazenly regulating her affairs to suit Athenian interests. Apparently, after revolt, her later assessment of 7 talents was among the highest in Ionia, and the fourth country, Ethrae, was in the Hectomomid, Persian satrapal sphere of influence. Honors to Masus and Andreus, it made a treaty with Hermias. Ethrae enjoyed free and immune status under Alexander the Great and the Seleucids. I wonder why. Because he looked at these Ethrae, which is named after the Edomites. Ethrae just means red. What does Edom mean? Red. When Alexander comes into power, he grants these people amnesty. Why? Because they're the same people. He knows the history. Okay, and that comes from the works of Sir Thomas Brown, page 177. Next quote here. The Greeks right at sea Erethium of the king called Ethrais or Ethreus. They had a king called Ethreus. Who's this? Esau. This is a descendant of Esau. Ethreus just means red. And we read earlier that he had relationships with Kittim, which is Greece, and then Italy. Or Kittim could be Greece or Italy. Let's put it like that. Because Ethros and the Greek signified red. Hence it is that the being dominated of this Ethros, the son of Perseus, and Andromeda, yet it took the name of the Red Sea, as Quinn Curtius conjectures. The works of Sir Walter Raleigh, page 83. So you have this tribe within the Ionian kingdom, okay, which was of Japhet, called Ethreus, King Ethreus, the Edomites, the red people. Edom. Easy, man. This is easy. This is, if you still want to believe that Esau is somebody else after watching this, so you have an agenda, because the understanding and the knowledge and the records are here. All right, let's go back to the Romans. Mars. Mars has old origins. Some suggest he was an agricultural god of Sabine people, as a god who watched over their food supply. Mars was seen as the primary protector of their society. Mars was also known as the father of Romulus and Remus, the twin brothers who, according to some legends, founded the city of Rome. He was referred to as Father Mars, and Romans believed themselves to be descendants of Mars. Why is this important? Because they named Mars, they named the planet after this Roman god Mars for a reason. Because they looked at that red star in the sky, and they said that represented blood and war. And that's the same thing the god Mars represented. And this is also why they wore red shields and red clothes and stuff of that nature. But it also reflects on them because they are a red people. Okay? I'm going to read on. As Rome explained, that's why we read earlier, Rufus was a common name amongst the Romans. Like, in medieval times, you had people call themselves Brown or Swart or Stewart. Why? Because their family, Stewart means dark skin. Their family would be dark skin, or brown. Their family were brown. That's why they had that surname off the pigmentation in their body. Same thing with these Edomites. They had surnames like Rufus. You even have a guy named Rufus in the New Testament. Okay? Because they named their slaves, the name of their slaves would get their names. Like, that's why Josephus, his name is Flavius Josephus, because he worked under the Roman Flavius. Okay? He was under his control. He was a servant of Rome. So, as you can see, all this ties together. They were known as the Ethreus under the Ionian kingdom, which is the red, the Edom. Okay, that's where you get the Red Sea from. And they were known as red people in Rome. It's that simple. They was known as red by the Arabs. Okay? The only people that don't know this is people that's trying to push an agenda on YouTube instead of dealing with the records that we can examine. Okay? Rome expanded from a city into an empire through military power. Mars evolved into the god who protected the nation by protecting his army. And that way he became the god of war. When the Roman armies conquered people and lands across Europe and the Mediterranean, the soldiers and colonists who followed them built temples to Mars to thank him for their success. They built most of their temples outside of cities where Mars could watch over the land. They named the planet after this god because of its red color. Red was associated with war and bloodshed. The source is Greek and Roman mythology by Kaplan and Daly, page 89. As you can see that, and we also going to get into how they painted their face after Jupiter, because Jupiter is the father of Mars, and they will paint their face red. Now, they believe they descended from these people, not only their gods, like we brought out in the last video, Euhemerism, when they deified their ancestors, okay? So they know they come from someone known of being red, which is what? Edom. It's not hard, man. Just don't make it hard. All right, the last few, let's get to it. Let's get to it. Yeah, let's do that right there. Boom. A little more information about the image of Jupiter and the quadriga which Volca made for the Capitoline temple can be gleaned from several other sources. The image of the Jupiter had a special connection with the Roman military victories. It was an ancient custom in Rome that victorious military commanders might be officially awarded a triumph, the essence of which was a religious procession from the gates of the city of the Capitoline, where a sacrifice was offered to Jupiter. During its procession, the victorious commander, dressed in the garb and attributes of Jupiter himself. What's the attributes of Jupiter? We're about to see. Was conveyed in a quadriga to the temple of Jupiter, accompanied by his army, his captives, and the spoils of his victory. And describing the similarity between the trumpeter, and Jupiter, which even involved a custom mentioned by Pliny of painting the commander's face red, because they believed that was an attribute of Jupiter. They believed that he was red. Why? Because they believe they come from a red deity. Because that goes back to Esau, Edom. Livy and Servius preserved some hints of what the attributes of Vulcan's image of Jupiter were. Servius' commentary on Virgil Eclogue X 27, 10 and 27. In course of the commenting on the word minimum, vermilion red, Servius says the color red associated with Jupiter, which even those who celebrate trumpet, who have all insignias of Jupiter, the scepter, the palm branch, the tunic, which Juvenal said in the tunic of Jupiter, even the color, the face with red. Now, they believe they descended from these deities. They believe themselves, they are red. They are the red people. That's why they called themselves Rufus. That's why that was a common name amongst the Romans. They come from Esau. Case closed. Oh, they didn't call, yes, white people call red. They associate themselves with vermilion and red. Livy, X, 10, 7, and 9. Parts of speech delivered 300 BC by the consul Publius Decius Mus in support of admitting the plebs into the traditionally patrician priesthood, to whom the gods of men is possible to strive in a nation. If those men whom you have honored with the curule chair, the toga practacia, the palm branch toga and painted, and it's cut off there, but it should say painted red. The origin of the custom is obscure. Most ancient sculptures, the flesh part of a male figure was normally painted reddish brown, while the flesh of a woman was painted white, and the redness of an image of Jupiter may simply be a reflection of this custom. Pliny, however, states the face of the image was continually repainted in red on holidays, which suggests that red color has some religious significance. Greek and Roman mythology by Kaplan and Daly, page 89. So we can see this connection. They believed that God was red. They called themselves red. You had the Aetherius, King Aetherius, called the Great Red King, right? You had these people. So we know what people that were designated as red people in history. The Arabs called them red. They said they come from Esau, okay? The Jewish writings identify them with Esau. All this information is saying these people are Edomites, except people that have an agenda, okay? This is what the history states. I'm going to go with what the ancients say. I'm not going to go with what people want to make of with their interpretations. Next slide. All right, we're going to, last 3 slides, we're going to get into the Middle Age Jewish writings, which were our people as well. Because you know when you mention Middle Age Jewish, oh, who are these? Like, bruh, we were in Europe. Understand that. The Sephardic Jews were Negroid. I did a video called The Negro Jews, the history of the Negro Jews. Go check it out. You have to understand that. These people writing this were your people. Anyway, let's get into it. The third example, evidently based on Josephus the Zealous, appears in Sefer Nizam Yashan, compound in southern Germany and northern France by unknown author in the early 14th century. It follows the formula know what to answer and presents the most radical formulation of the claim that the Jews are black and ugly, but with a new explanation. The Gentile asks and say, why are most Gentiles white and beautiful and most Jews black and ugly? This lets you know what color the Jews were in the Middle Ages. Right there. They were black. Answer them that it's like a fruit. When it begins to blossom, it is white, but when fully ripe, it becomes black. Like those are the dark species plums. Because when you examine a baby, some babies are born light, then they become black. That's how he's explaining the Jews get their color. While the fruit that is red in the beginning will have white fruit, like apples or peaches. This proves to Israel that it's pure menstrual blood, meaning they don't have any menstrual blood or uncleanness in them, with no red whatever in the beginning. But the Gentiles are not warned against such blood and copulate when they see blood, so there is red in the beginning. Hence the fruit brings forth white, and they are white. So he's showing red, the relationship of redness with white or pale skin. You can see the blood through their skin. And one should also answer, for the Gentiles fornicate in the beds of a woman by day, seeing beautiful faces and pictures, and give birth to children to resemble them, as it is said. And he set the striped rods. Now that's going to something else. But anyway, you can see that he's calling this Gentile red and white. Okay? Because they knew that these people that were trying to be Christians, trying to take our role as the Jews, trying to take over at this time, they were Edomites. Next scripture. Well, next slide. And you can see I got the scripture, Genesis 25:25. And the first came out red all over like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. What nation was reputed as being red? We just went all over. The Romans. You had the sect of the Grecians. The Ionians. Was it King Atreus, and then the Athenians. Okay? We can clearly see who fits this. And the polemic writings repeat the same arguments, since the authors copy from one another. Sefer, Yosef, Ha-Mekhanah, Joseph the Zealous, written by Joseph Barnathan of Zeal in northern France in the middle of the 13th country, contains the following dispute between an apostate Jew and the other's fathers, Robert and Nathan. I made you contemptible and base before all people. Malachi 2:9 said a certain apostate, Rabbi Nathan, you are uglier than any people on earth, and our people are very handsome. He replied, those big plums that grow along the scene, what blossom they have? He said to him, white. And what color is the apple blossom? He said, red. He answered, that is what we are from, a pure white seed, which is the sperm, and our faces are dark. They become dark when they get older. While you Edomites, a red race, conceived from a menstrual woman, so that you are yellow and red. The blonde hair and the complexion is red because of the blood. We looked at the picture of Justinian. He was depicted as a red, white, palish person. Conceived from a menstruous woman, so that you are yellow and red. So, as you can see, we understood who the Edomites were. These people that were going around pretending to be Christians during the 1300s, 1400s, taking our kingdom from the end of the Dark Ages, going into the Renaissance, were Edomites. Okay, we understood that. Descendants of Rome, descendants of Alexander and the Macedonians, descendants of Esau, ultimately. We can see that. And that's from the image of the black and Jewish culture, A History of the Others by Abraham Melamed. And I don't think I said this. Let me go back. Oh, yeah, it's both the same book. That's page 34, the other's page 27. Last one. Truth. Research. No more lazy scholarship. Stop with your lazy scholarship. It's not working. Okay, it's just creating confusion, like I said before. You just giving room to these other sects that want to come with interpretation and make up their own, or make up something, or push something out there, push another agenda. When we start actually teaching and actually breaking these topics down in this manner, we can cut back on a lot of that friction, if you will. That show that this is not something that anybody can just come do. It show that you have to sit down and take time out and actually go through different sources to create a chronology, or create an analogy between the different sources to prove your point, to paint a vivid picture for the layman that might not know, so he can learn and grasp it, and not just be a parakeet and just go, oh, Esau's red and hairy all over. No, we want to be able to explain it. I want our brothers to be able to bring these sources to the forefront. Hey, the Romans, they had a common name of Rufus, denoting red. Okay, descended from Mars. Jupiter was Mars' father. He was depicted as being a red god. Okay, you got to understand these things, and they claim to descend from him. Okay, this red nation. These are the red people. Right? So, like I said, to recap real quick, the Arabs believe that what? The Romans descend from Esau. The Romans believe they descended from Mars, which is why they named They named the planet Mars because it was that red star in the sky. And they believe they descended from, by saying they descend from Mars, they descend from Jupiter because Jupiter is the father of Mars. And how did they venerate Jupiter? By painting red, by dressing like him and painting that red on their face. Because they believe they come from red beings, okay? Because they are a nation of red people. We read about Idomeneus coming to Italy, Zepho, the history of Zepho going there. We read the Latin history of Latinus and how Latinus ties with Duke Lotan or Duke Latin, right? So we can clearly see the ties of Esau, him going into Europe because he's from the Middle East, him invading those areas, King Etreus, so on and so forth. All right, and how they tie with the Romans and the Grecians, and how they tie with the Christians in the Middle Ages, which I brought on, who was Esau, were brought in by, there was Esauians, coming into the Byzantine lineup by war and marriage. Okay, that's how you get the Edomites coming into the Christian paradigm. Before that, it was all black. With that, I'm going to say shalom. I hope that this was very insightful. I hope you took notes. You had your pens and your papers, and you were saving these sources so you can have good material to provide on the behalf that Esau is the Caucasian, the Roman, okay? And we do know who he is. A lot of people want to pretend like they don't know who anybody is nowadays. We can trace people through the historical data that we have. Okay, we're not slaves no more. We can read. Slaves can read now. With that, Genesis 49ers signing out.